What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to shrink down a woven bodice pattern to create a stretchy or a knitwear top, such as this lovely ivory blouse that I have on here. In this tutorial I show you guys how to make the pattern and then go on to test it by creating this sample piece that I have on at the moment. The only correction I would mention is the collar right here. I would drop the neckline like 1 or 2 centimeters lower, and then this particular collar piece for the pattern I would make it shorter as well. For the sleeves I think it's a little bit too snug. I would actually make it a little bit looser by about ½ inch. So instead of applying a negative ease of 1 inch on both sides of the sleeve, I would apply only ½ inch so I can, lift my hand and drop them a lot more comfortably. But if you guys like to see how this pattern is made as well as the construction of this blouse, make sure to keep on watching. I ended up using the spare material to make a matching skirt, so I ended up having a cord set that looks really nice together. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this tutorial and want to keep seeing videos like these. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump straight into the video. These are the following materials I'm going to be using for this knitwear project. First off, I've laid them out here nice and flat. I'll be working from my graded bodice front and back, and this pattern goes from size 6 all the way to 16. All items mentioned and shown in this video will be linked down below for anyone who wants to check them out. So all you need to do with that pattern is just trace out the size you want to work with and add your seam allowance. I'll also be using my sleeve pattern from my one shoulder dress tutorial, which I would link down below as well. I'll be needing my tape, scissors, pen, pins, my pattern master, and a set square as well. For fabrics, I decided to be more, let's say, experimental. I'm using this stretchy fabric that has raised bubbles on the surface, which might irritate some people, so I just apologize in advance. I also got myself a matching lightweight scuba fabric in case I needed to line my top. I got 1.5 meters of each fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and trace out the size I'm going to be working with. I'm going to be working with size 8. I believe that's the size I am at the moment. I tend to go up and down sizes depending on sort of my current state. So I went ahead to trace out my front, ignoring the dart since we're working with a stretchy fabric. I traced out my back as well, keeping my center back line nice and straight since we'll be cutting that on a fold. I'm going to go ahead and shrink down my front bodice. For the front along the waist, I'm going to be applying a negative ease of 1.5 inch. That takes away the darts and accommodates the stretch of your material as well. For the underarm and the hip line, I decided to add a 1 inch negative ease, which basically means instead of adding it to the outside of that seam line, you add it to the inside. So I'm just going ahead to join my lines like so. So I have my new seam line for my stretchy fabric. The thing with stretchy fabrics is you always want to remember and keep in mind how stretchy the fabric is. The stretchier, the more negative ease you need to add to your pattern. So for my shoulder, I decided to add a ½ inch negative ease here like so, and for the armhole, about 1 centimeter around this edge, which ended up for this armhole to just be the seam line here, and then the dark black line became the edge of the pattern. So I didn't need to add a seam allowance line for the shoulder and the armhole. So I'm just going back in here to double check that all of the measurements are sort of on track and it worked for me. This is what my front bodice looks like at this point. Always remember that when you make patterns for stretch fabric, they usually look smaller than what you would have if you were working for woven fabric, because your fabric is going to stretch out to accommodate for the necessary measurements. So for my top, I decided to work with 22 inches in length, and I want a sort of curved hemline that dips on the center front and is curved up the sides like so. So I went ahead and added my 1 centimeter seam allowance on the hem and on the side as well before going out to cut out my front pattern Bodice for stretch fabric. So this is what the front looks like. If you want a seam on that center front, just remember to add a seam allowance there as well. I'm going to go ahead and repeat similar steps for the back. I have my plain back woven bodice here, and I'm placing my front, which we just did earlier on, over this because I want the hem and the sides to match. So using my tracing wheel, I'm going to trace the hemline along this front onto the back. What the tracing wheel does is it makes like holes through the paper, so I can go back and draw all over those holes to have my pattern edge. So I'm just using my, this is actually a highlighter pen. I just wanted a contrasting color so you guys don't get confused when you're watching this video. I'm just drawing in the hemline for the back as well as the side seam. You don't need to add a seam allowance for the side and the hem because the front already had the 1 centimeter seam allowance added. So I'm just drawing the negative ease for the shoulder and for the back neckline as well, which is about 1 centimeter or half an inch. So with that done, I went ahead to transfer my notches on the armhole, write down my annotations, and then cut out my pattern piece. So I cut out my pattern piece first before I wrote down my annotations, as you can see here. And for the back, I'm going to be cutting it on a fold as well. So we just have one piece for the front and one piece for the back of the garment. For the sleeve, because I wanted the sleeve to be fitted around the wrist and around the elbow, I went ahead and applied a 1 inch negative ease on both sides. This ended up being a bit too much. I should have really applied about half an inch because the sleeves felt a little bit too tight, so just keep that in mind. So these are all of my patterns done. The only additional pattern I did that I didn't show was I made a collar piece that is 17 inches long and 3 inches wide. It's a little bit longer here in this particular clip. I ended up making this shorter because the collar was really big and I didn't like that, so I reduced the pattern down to 17 inches length. So now that we have all of our patterns ready, it's time to go ahead and test and see if they actually work and if they turn out right. I'm going ahead to cut out my pieces onto fabric. I'm cutting my front and back on a fold along the grain line because the fabric stretches against the grain, which means it stretches sideways and not upwards along the grain. I hope that wasn't confusing, but I'm just going ahead to cut out along this armhole here for the front, along the neckline, and along the shoulder as well. So with that done, don't forget to cut your notches, especially around your bust, your waist, and the armhole, indicating what side is the front and one side is the back. So once all your notches are ready and all your pieces are cut out, this is how many pieces you should have. One piece for your back, which is on a fold, except you want a seam or you want to put a zip or a fastening there. And then I have one piece for my front, and then I have my collar piece, which is just this long rectangle that I'm going to join up the center back and attach along the neckline. I also have my sleeves, which is 2 pieces as a whole. So now that we have all of our pieces cut, it's time to join the front to the back. This is the back piece here. I'm going to layer the front over it, and I'm going to be joining up the side seams as well as the shoulder. Now sewing on my domestic machine on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch, I am joining the shoulders as well as the side of my front to the back. And afterwards, I'm going to go back in with a zigzag stitch, and this would help to secure my seam and prevent it from breaking when I wear this garment over time. It's advisable to use a special thread and stitch when you're sewing stretchy fabrics. If you guys have any more information about that, feel free to share down below so we all learn together. Next up, I'm going ahead to fold and sew the hemline of the top all the way around. What really helps when it comes to like folding hems like this is I pin at certain points, so I sort of maintain an even amount of seam allowance all the way around. It can be really tricky to do this just folding and sewing. So once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and work on my sleeves. I'm pinning together the side seams of this particular sleeve here. I'm going to be sewing up the side seams of both sleeves before attaching it into the armhole of the garment. So now just sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch from the beginning to the end, remembering to do my back stitch to secure my seam at the end. I'm going to ensure that I stitch the right sides together of my sleeves for the left and for the right hand side. So once that is done, I am hemming the sleeve hem. So I fold this up one time and I stitch all the way around. If doing a basting stitch will make this easier for you, go ahead and do so. If putting pins will make this easier, go ahead and do so. So next up here, I'm sewing with the longest stitch over the top of the sleeve head, and this is going to help me gather in all the excess that would make the gathering on the sleeve head of this particular garment. So now I'm just pulling the thread so I can make gathers, and then I'm going to fit this into the armhole of my garment, starting with this particular side here. I found that the sleeve head was a little bit too round for the armhole, so if you're going to be working with the same pattern I used, you have the freedom to reduce the sleeve head by about 1 inch so it comes down a little bit and you don't have so much gathers to sew into the armhole of your garment. So once you've pinned this armhole and the sleeve together, I can go ahead and do the same with the other one so you can fix the sleeve into the armhole of the top. Now sewing using a normal straight stitch on a 1 cm seam allowance, I am slowly and carefully joining the sleeve head into the armhole of the garment from the beginning all the way to the end, remembering to take out my pin so I don't break the needle of my machine. And once I have done that, I'm going to go back in with my zigzag stitch to secure my seam and the sleeve into this garment here. I need to do this for the left and for the right hand side, so we know we have both sleeves ready and fixed into the garment. Once that is done, you can go ahead and sew your collar piece together like so, joining it up on the open end so you have sort of a tube or a circle that you can join into the neckline of your top. So I'm sewing here in a 1 cm seam allowance. No need to do a zigzag stitch here because we're going to fold this over like so. This is going to sit in the center back of your top. I like to put a pin here on the sides and in the center front so I can sort of pin together those 4 crucial points, and then if I want to go ahead and add more pins, I can do so. So I'm going to get out my top, which is looking really cute, and I'm going to pin the collar in like so. I like to usually start from the center back or the center front. It doesn't really matter, you can do whatever works for you, but I like to keep the seam on the center back of the top. So once that is pinned up and ready to go, you can go ahead and take this to your machine and sew up the collar into the neckline of the top. The one thing I would say is if I were to do this again, I would make the collar piece even smaller, because when I finished and I tried it on, I found the collar to be standing in a very unflattering way. That would be the one thing I would change about this garment, and making the sleeves a little bit roomier so it doesn't fit as snug. But aside that, so far so good. Once I'm done sewing in the collar, I'm going ahead to do my trusty old zigzag stitch to secure my seam and secure my collar in place. It was after I made this garment I realized that this fabric is actually for making baby blankets and towels, but well, it turned out right and I can't complain, and I actually would wear this out, so don't judge me. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video all the same. If you did, let me know in the comment section down below. I ended up using the leftover fabric to make a simple tube skirt, and I'll probably wear them as a set with some boots and a jacket over the holiday season. It's a really chic and stunning set worn together, or probably wear the top on its own with some trousers or a skirt, in any way that I really want. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.